Okay, so I'm going to talk about an Edwardian Sunday, Broom Hill, Sheffield. Just to put this in context, let me say a little bit about Broom Hill. Sheffield is built on 7 hills, and one of those hills is Broom Hill, and it's situated at the west of the city, and it's quite a wealthy, sort of privileged kind of place. Think of Harrow on the Hill. It's a bit like Harrow on the Hill. Anyway, one of the things about Broom Hill, there's lots of big posh houses there. I know that because I used to live in Sheffield when I was a student, and it was one of those nice places. But the wind blew the fumes from the factories away from Broom Hill, and so it was, it was a really nice, clean place to live as well, free from pollution. And that's actually quite relevant when you look at what this poem's about. So that's a little bit about Broom Hill. Let's have a look at this first verse. The first verse describes Broom Hill. Structure of this poem is quite ordered. The first verse talks about Broom Hill. The second also talks about Broom Hill and the people from the centre of the city coming on a Sunday. And then the last verse is pretty much about the centre of the city, the more sort of polluted or chemical valley it's described as, centre of the city, down in the industrial valley. So Broom Hill is presented as a place not only situated high on a hill, but the houses themselves are really rather lofty, rather grand. Look at some of these words: high dormers, turreted stable, gable to gable. They're all architecturally quite grand and quite literally quite high buildings. And there's a sense that the people in Broom Hill are looking down on, it actually says in line 6, look down on ravines. So this is a very grand place, characterised by these very large, grand houses. And it's rather beautiful as well. It seems to be a very natural, leafy kind of place as well, as of course it is. It talks about ponticum edges, which are, kind of nicely tended gardens, front gardens. Also, I think it talks about the sylvan expansion, kind of woody area, and it talks about laurel and holly commingle their green. So it's a rather leafy place that seems to be surrounded by natural beauty. Perhaps not entirely natural though, the beauty. It seems like the gardens are attended in a fairly fastidious way. So perhaps the residents there in Broom Hill are paying a lot of attention and sort of influencing nature, sort of taming it a little bit. It feels a little bit smug. Look at the where laurel and holly commingle their greens. It's almost as if the natural world is kind of rather enjoying itself. The tone feels a little bit smug. There's quite a lot of hyperbole in this verse as well. Quite a lot of exaggerated language. I think because, of course, Betjeman's trying to present it as a very beautiful place, and is exaggerating his presentation of that, I guess, to draw our attention to how different it is to Chemical Valley. So the tone, it feels rather grand, maybe a little bit smug. Let's have a look at the second verse. So serene on a Sunday. So I'll just zoom out a bit. Serene on a Sunday. It's the sun's glittering. There's even the sun shining there, the people from the mill workers come to this area as a kind of little day trip, to kind of enjoy a place of beauty that is different from where they actually live. So there's this idea that people are coming out to Broom Hill to enjoy the environment there. Look at that line, but in our arboreta, the sounds are discreeter. Again, the voice there, it feels a bit smug, doesn't it? That even, in Broom Hill, everything sounds just a little bit better. It's less noisy. It's more beautiful. And it's not a place where engines will hum. That's the industrial part of the city. So the mill workers come to Broom Hill to enjoy the environment, and it talks about worshippers wending, walking casually to the chapel. So Betjeman kind of homes in on a church on a Sunday, and he talks about Eve, the Iron King's daughter, in church. What is going on? Well, it's very ambiguous. Is it a wedding? Is it just a church service? But let's have a look at how Eve is presented here. It's quite a tempting image. Of course, Eve reminds us of the Adam and Eve story in the Old Testament. She was a temptress. She was the one who picked the forbidden fruit and tempted Adam. So Eve shows her apple through rich bombazine. What's rich bombazine? It is a sort of a very rich fabric. What's she showing? What is her apple? Well, I'm thinking that it seems somehow sexually alluring, doesn't it? And also she's blushing, which is a sign of passion as well. So there's something about this Eve that is a bit alluring, and obviously she's very wealthy. She seems to be dressed in nice clothes. What love is born new there in blushing 18. So either she's getting married or she's just a member of the congregation, but the eyes are on her. It feels a little bit voyeuristic. Is this? It was reminiscent of kind of Betjeman, the dirty old man figure from Senex and Lenten Thoughts. It's interesting to look at the presentation of this figure Eve from a feminist perspective. For those of you that are doing this, Betjeman's poems for your coursework from a feminist perspective. So let's move on to the last verse. Your prospects will please her, the Iron King's daughter. What is the Iron King? Presumably, he's the factory owner. This is where the factory owners lived in Broom Hill, Sheffield. Again, comic exaggeration, describing him as an Iron King. It's quite hyperbolic, isn't it? A little bit tongue-in-cheek, but certainly there's a reference there to wealth. You know, the fact that this Eve has probably got a wonderful life mapped out in front of her up here on Broom Hill. So the image moves from presumably church to this view of the Iron King's daughter and the life ahead of her, and then we move on to Betjeman exploring the differences in Sheffield. Strange Hallamshire County, that's Sheffield is in Hallamshire. Strange Hallamshire County, it's actually in Yorkshire, but Hallam, the Hallam University, Sheffield, the old Sheffield Poly. So we've got of dearth and of bounty. So of dearth, that is the chemical valley here that's described in the last verse. Of dearth and of bounty. Bounty meaning Broom Hill, and dearth meaning absolute lack. In the centre of town, where there's the furnace and mill and brown tumbling water. We've got lots of images of pollution, haven't we? Brown tumbling water, dirty stream from the mill. Chemical valley, back street and alley. So it's a place that is very poor. Anybody who's been to the centre of Sheffield could see really it is a very poor area, and then the outskirts are really completely different. And he explores this the difference between the gap between the rich and the poor in that line 47 as well, on ugly and pretty. Ugly is, I guess, the industrial area, and pretty is Broom Hill. So the place where industry thrives, hill-shadowed city. Yes, it's very much in the shadows of Broom Hill, kind of dark place, of razors and knives. Why razors and knives? Well, Sheffield was known for its stainless steel manufacture of cutlery. So I think that's sort of a reference to that. Maybe a pun, really, on the fact that Sheffield was known for making knives. What do the razors and knives hint of? There's something vaguely threatening about that. As if maybe there's some kind of animosity between the poor and the rich. So in this poem then, Betjeman is really drawing attention to the differences in Sheffield between the rich and the poor. He doesn't really, unusually, not like a lot of his other poems, he doesn't really focus on the wealthy and explore their behaviours. What his focus is here is the difference between the rich and the poor, and he uses contrast. And that, I think, is the main, that and of course irony, the irony of the ending, razors and knives and hyperbole. Irony, contrast and hyperbole are the main techniques that are used here.